Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Black Girl Ambition with me, Naya Baxter. This is your go-to space for community empowerment and practical tips to help you level up in your career and in all aspects of your life. Here, we have real conversations about navigating corporate careers, entrepreneurship, wellness, and Black womanhood. I like to describe Black Girl Ambition as equal parts executive level coffee chat meets sister circle meets motivational masterclass. Black Girl Ambition is not just a podcast, it is a movement. And you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite streaming platform. And if you love the mission and the message, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and please share with a friend if you have not already. And if you have already, share with another friend. This episode today is very special because it celebrates the launch of Black Girl Ambition. 1 year ago, almost to the day, I started this podcast as a way to embrace ambition and amplify the stories and the success and journeys of Black women in corporate and entrepreneurship. During our very first episode last year, we spoke with Janice Omadeke about her career journey as CEO and tech founder, product development executive, and notably being one of the first Black women in the country to raise over $1 million for her former company, Mentor Method, which is an enterprise software designed to drive transformative relationships at companies. In 2022, Entrepreneur Magazine named Janice among its 100 most influential women. During this conversation, we also explored her accomplishment as a published author of her first book, Mentorship Unlocked. But today, my beautiful friend Janice is in a very different place in her life. And I'm looking forward to unpacking that with all of you today. So, the thread for this conversation will be one of evolution, that is, reframing success and defining what is next. Janice, thank you so much for joining me today and for being here.
I'm so excited for round 2. I can't wait to catch up with you.
Janice, give the Black Girl Ambition audience an update on what has changed for you since our last conversation on this platform.
I think the summary is everything, honestly, in a very good way. So it was October of last year, so similar season, and I was at a different employer. I had a different set of goals and just completely different season. Since then, I've been really focused on optimizing how I speak to myself, optimizing my inner world, pruning my circles quite aggressively. Can't wait to talk about that. And then also making sure that energetically, I'm doing everything I can to pour into my vibrational elevation, because that then has attracted so many lovely and wonderful opportunities. European travel, some of the closest friendships I've had and have had the privilege of being able to develop with my friends, new opportunities. I just did a podcast recording with Masters of Scale that was released a couple of days ago. Just really wonderful opportunities have found their way to me through this inner work, and just really shifting the priority from building businesses and kind of externally facing to using those same principles and a lot of that grit and resilience to clearing house, let's say.
Like that inner work manifests itself as those outcomes and those new opportunities and experiences.
Exactly. And it gives you a whole other perspective on life and, what you want to do, the types of careers you want to pursue. I found that the greatest gift in that work was learning about who I am and feeling even more indefensible and unstoppable, which I did not know was possible considering the career trajectory we've talked about. But that happened, and finding the joy in that and finding the confidence to just rest in that has been one of the biggest gifts. I'm just trying to get on your level, Naya,
Girl,
whatever it
please.
takes.
The feeling is mutual. I love this conversation already. The theme of this conversation is evolution, as I mentioned, and that can be very exciting, Janice, but it can also be very unsettling, right? So I'm curious what part of evolution you are most excited about and what makes you uncomfortable. What is Janice 2.0? Let's call her Janice 2.0.
Yeah.
What does she look like?
Fabulous, most likely.
Duh.
But I think what excites me the most about this is when you start to see the results and the outcomes. The part that makes me the least comfortable is the work to get to that outcome when you don't know what it's going to be and you're in that valley and you are just having that blind faith and belief in yourself that the mantras and the work and the exploration and the releasing of old beliefs and practicing adopting new ones and really using the techniques from, my therapist, Danielle Locklear, and others, putting it into practice and putting it into play, that takes time. And so the valley of tinkering and kind of being a mad scientist with your own self-work and being that mirror of accountability, it's challenging. Nobody really enjoys that as much, but going through that process as I have done and continue to do and seeing the outcomes and the benefits of it incentivize me even more to just keep going.
It's like you're in my head. And you all, if you have not already, so Janice shouted out Danielle Locklear, and she was a guest actually last season on Black Girl Ambition. Thanks to Janice and her introduction, we recorded an episode together called My Ambition is to Live a Soft Life. So I encourage you to go back and listen. Janice, if you had to describe where you are this new season of your life in one word, what would that be?
Curious.
Why curious?
Keeping an open mind to the pathways and journeys that life is going to take, keeping an open mind around the types of companies that I'll join in the future and how my roles now as a product marketing executive, who knows what that's going to look like 2 or 3 years from now. So staying open across every area of my life requires a level of curiosity to what's next. And with every new opportunity or every next step or every new item that I learn, either skill or something about myself, I stay curious as to why this has been presented to me. What am I supposed to learn in this season? What am I supposed to glean from this moment? And that curiosity for me tends to prevent any sort of overthinking, anxiety, self-sabotage, all the things that can interrupt that flow and that elevation.
Yes, I found it very helpful when I'm going through difficult seasons in particular, not to gripe about it, but to ask myself what I'm supposed to learn. What are
Exactly.
you trying to teach me? What am I supposed to learn from this? And that reframing changes everything because it goes from self wallowing and complaining and feeling maybe attacked or more of a victim to taking more control over whatever's happening because you release yourself from the outcome in a sense. It's like, what am I supposed to learn? That's the point.
That's exactly right. That framing effect is, so are you familiar with the framing effect? Have we talked about this?
No, we have not.
So it's a theory that was developed by two Israeli researchers in the 1980s, and it was studying how the consumption of data impacts how you actually proceed in the world. So let's say you have the same fact of, let's use one that's actually like tangible and real for the audience. So in 2022, there were a lot of conversations around the fact that post-pandemic, the investment dollars that were sort of promoted externally by larger corporations didn't necessarily align to the way in which women-led businesses and Black women-led businesses were invested in. I think the studies were showing that only 0.34% of all venture capital dollars went to women in 2022, which indicated that the needle didn't really move as much as we would have liked. And so if we look at that fact, it can be presented one of two ways. The first way is how I presented it just now, which has a tone and a lens of coming from lack or fear-based, where if you're an entrepreneur and you hear only 0.34% of you essentially will make it, that's pretty intimidating and pretty daunting. But if you flip that and reframe it and say, okay, well, today there are 2.1 million Black woman-owned businesses that are generating over $100 billion in revenue. And the number of businesses owned by Black women grew by 50% from 2014 to 2019. And that's representing the highest growth rate of any female demographic in history. And the fact that Black females accounted for 42% of all women who opened new businesses in 2022. Which one sounds more empowering? But
Wow.
we don't hear a lot of the latter. Like that took
No.
research, that took time to find out that information and to
Hmm.
seek out what's really happening. Like, yes, those stats are true, like they're calculated and they're true. But what I also shared on the flip side is true as well. So,
Hmm.
which one are you going to use as your compass and your guide as you're building out your life? Are you going to use the stats that are more fear based? Or are you going to seek out examples of how it's been done, examples of those who have done it, and start brainstorming how you can put your own authentic lens into the delivery of what you want to do? Because if one can do it, others can. And if you're feeling that call and you're feeling that pull, there's a good chance that you're supposed to be part of that story as well. So go for it, you know? But that framing of it is really important.
That is very powerful. That is very powerful and a very clear example of what you mean by the framing effect. I'm also impressed that you were able to rattle off all those stats. Janice is not looking at any piece of paper right now. Those are committed to memory, okay?
It's
Okay,
important.
Janice
It's
is the real
important.
deal.
Yeah, I think my personality and the way that I approach the world, especially in business, is positivity met with tactical in the arena strategies.
Mm,
You know, I'm smiling, but I also have my tool belt with me. And part of that is also knowing the stats and knowing the numbers so that when I'm on a panel or I'm engaging with less diverse communities that maybe aren't as aware and you need to have the facts, it's important to be able to support why I'm so adamant about advancing Black women across business, entrepreneurship, career, and otherwise. Would I love to live in a world where I would not need to justify why it's important to do that? Of course. But with this platform and the opportunities, and looking at November coming up, another election cycle, and the unemployment rates of Black women, I think being about somewhere between 5.3 and 5.6% the last time I looked 2 weeks ago. We have a lot of work to do. And here we are.
mm. Do you think that the stats and the way that they are presented are there to scare us or
Yes,
discourage us?
yes. Think about who owns the majority shares of the biggest media companies.
Hmm.
Do they look like us?
No.
Are we even in those rooms? You know, how much power are leaders who look like us or are women with an inclusive lens are even in a lot of those decisions? It's a very small percentage, unfortunately. I think I don't want to label it as malicious behavior. What I think it is a business. And unfortunately, those types of headlines are shorter, easier to understand, and they're clickbait. You know, you put your
Right.
little tile on Instagram through your account, put a quick tagline with a short percentage, and of course people are going to like it without reading and doing their own research. Of course people are going to share that. I think the goal now in a lot of our news and information consumption and the distribution of that data like you're talking about is meant to improve its clickbait and kind of that stickiness. If you look at publicly held companies in these spaces and their reports that are publicly available, anybody can Google them and find them. If you look at how they're measuring success, it's not about bettering people's lives with the information. It's not about the quality of the information that the consumer is digesting. It's about the return of the user, the frequency in which you're digesting it, how long they can keep you in their app or their news cycle, the number of views, the social media engagement. So the quality doesn't necessarily need to be there. It's the clickbait of the data. And I also think, just last piece on that, is they're banking on us being scared. They're banking on us being afraid. And while they can't say, hey, we don't necessarily want to make space for you because these systems have worked well for me, or hey, I don't necessarily fully understand how I can be a better ally in this because our numbers are actually doing really well. And my responsibility is to our shareholders. And since it's not broke, why would I fix it?
Mm.
I think that it's really coming through that lens and less malicious. But either way, it doesn't really help us.
Either way, it does not really help us. And there seems to be, to me, some complacency in it.
100%.
There's a lot of being Black in America that is hard, but it bothers me that our existence gets conflated with, it becomes a synonym for struggle. Like
I
all of it's
agree.
struggle.
I
And so
agree.
you put it in any headline in the media, it's like the framing is struggle. It's hard. It's difficult for you, challenges. And those challenges are absolutely true, but there's so much in how you position something, think about something. And there seems to be, I think it's laziness. I think it's laziness. I
Mm.
think it's complacency with who gets the spoils and who gets the crumbs. And, it's challenging for them over there. So we're just going to continue to frame it as such. I love this framing effect that you have walked us through, and in a very tangible, tactical way as well. I would love for you to share a moment when reframing, like, it changed the outcome for you. Maybe it was a meeting, maybe it was a pitch, maybe it was some tough personal decision that you had to make, but like this was the shift that changed how you moved ahead.
So I was considering what to do next in my career and what I was really driven and passionate about. Because if I'm honest, I was so passionate about the mentor method. I was passionate about the businesses after that and the book and everything else. And that sort of that drive and that energy is not sustainable for the rest of my career. But also, when you're in that moment and you're in that bubble, I spent 7 years building that business. But coming out of it at, in my mid 30s, I still have decades of time and creativity and ideas and projects. And I hadn't fully thought through that. I think for me, I had thought through, okay, let's build the business, raise, exit, help people, and then the next chapters will unfold. And what became very clear to me is, yes, the next chapters will unfold, but where do I want to take that, and who is this new person, as I've started kind of recovering from that entrepreneurial process that took 2 years to kind of detangle. So the problems that I was trying to figure out was just, what do I want to do next? And I was just flooded with a lot of uncertainty. I felt very confused and lost. Through that process, first thing I did was write down all of the fears that I have and what my inner saboteur, my inner naysayer was telling me, and just writing it down. So I had a piece of paper, one side just saying, just not even being compassionate about it, just letting that part of me that I typically don't allow a lot of airtime, if I'm being honest, but allowing it to actually just list out what are the concerns. On the other side, so sat with that, read through it, had compassion for that part of myself, and then said, okay, but none of this is actually true. Like, how do you know? How do you know that you're not good enough? How do you know that this industry won't be a good fit for you? How do you know that this challenge may present itself if you want to go from B2B SaaS to, say, regenerative healthcare? Like, how do you even know that? You haven't done it yet. And going through the list and changing what the naysayer was saying to positives and reframing that. So let's say my naysayer tells me that it'll be hard to change industries from traditional B2B SaaS, where I have been majority, into healthcare, let's say. What I told myself in that moment was, well, actually, you started off in defense contracting as a graphic designer, elevated into product management and product marketing in in management consulting, then studied entrepreneurship from MIT, strategic management from Harvard, and became an entrepreneur building a SaaS business. So we've been a multi-hyphenate. There just wasn't a term for it. So it's okay. But I have to, and maybe not, maybe no one else has to do this, but I have to really negotiate sometimes with myself. And what I find interesting is that both what I know to be true and my naysayer are very logical. So my naysayer will be like, oh yeah, but I found this stat and look at this data and on and on and on. And like, she knows exactly how to get to me. And I have to be the one to combat that and be in the front lines and compassionately say, okay, but let's work together to reframe that. Let's use that kind of protective part of myself and that energy, because the naysayer really just wants to be protective. It doesn't want you to get hurt. It doesn't want to see you fail. So how do we use that in a way to be a vehicle for growth and helping through that change management process of that, adding a new hyphen to my career, essentially?
I want to spend some time exploring this present moment for you in a really honest way. I know that you stepped away from the title of founder and you are now working in corporate. During that transition or throughout that transition, have you struggled at all with how you have defined yourself and how you separate your identity from the role that you do?
Yes and no. Knew going in. I had very confronting conversations in 2022 when I was going through the M&A process for the mentor method. Very confronting. Actually, I don't think I've talked about this anywhere on record.
Tell
Okay.
me.
So, when I was considering, we had some opportunities on the table for the mentor methods exit, and I had never faced that before. And so I had reached out to some mentors and people that I deeply respected. And one is a very successful entrepreneur here in Austin, but has a global business. And he was very impactful, very strong ally in the DEI space. So we met over Zoom on a Saturday, and he's telling me about his journey around, similar position. He had an incredible startup, his star was rising, but he knew based on the market that M&A was the correct approach, where somebody with either longer runway or just more resources could take that message and continue amplifying it through what he had already done, which was exactly how I was feeling about the mentor method at that time. So that was probably like 9 a.m. Call ends at 10. And then I have a virtual session with one of my leadership coaches that walks me through the most intense visualization I've ever done. So I'm in my living room, lying down on the couch. She's walking me through this. She tells me to visualize myself as a mother to a 5 to 7 year old child, and that this child is in the back seat of my car, and I am driving said child to meet its adoptive parents. And the child is the mentor method. The adoptive parents were the potential strategic partners that were evaluating us for an acquisition. And she's having me visualize it in this way because there's a lot of love that goes into your first business, a lot of love. And so she wanted to kind of walk me through what that would feel like. So she's telling me, okay, talk to your child, your mentor method child in the back seat, and explain where you're going. Explain why you chose this family for her. Explain why this is a good thing. Okay, now you're at the drop off. What are you saying to these adoptive parents? What are their values? What do they believe in? Are they kind? Are they organized? What are the things that made you feel confident in giving your child to this person? What are you using as the reason? And then had me visualize dropping said child off and driving away. And all of that was to help me visualize and let go of that pressure and what it would feel like to depart from that identity, and also think through the value system and who I would want to have as a strong M&A partner, without making me build a list, but instead really thinking about it from a different way that I had never considered before. So we did that. And then once I was able to gather myself multiple hours later, because that was a deeper dive than I thought, I was able to rid myself of that sort of identity crisis completely. So now it's less about who am I and more of I have these incredible skills across product marketing, entrepreneurship, being an empathetic leader that also generates incredible results for the companies and teams that I'm a part of, and wanting to put those in the right places. And I've been able to reframe a lot of that into, okay, which team gets my gifts? Which team do I get to join that is doing work that is so exciting and so incredible that, there are brilliant minds already around the table. I'm just kind of another piece that's slotted in to amplify that work with my skill set. And using that really helps me mitigate a lot of that ego-driven kind of, I need to be this. Like, I need to be a chief something. I need to be a director of X. Do you? Or do you need a job that has flexibility? Do you need a job where you can see that your work is improving revenue and conversion numbers? Like, what actually matters to you more than the title? And focusing on that has been a big relief, especially in 2025. Like, 2025 has no room for ego. We must be tactical this year and for the next 3 years, unfortunately.
I find you to be highly strategic, highly analytical and research driven and organized and disciplined, but you're also very empathetic. You also are into astrology. Something unique about you that I find is that it's this combination. You usually find one or the other. It's people who, will do the woo woo stuff, but then they're not so focused on the strategy and the
Yeah.
analytics and the research. And you very much blend both in
Yeah.
how you show up as a person and a leader.
Yeah. Woo woo can be strategic. Woo does not mean that you're wearing Birkenstocks to dinner.
I feel like we
You
need
know?
to do some sort of research paper or a TED talk on this because I completely agree. It gets discounted,
It
but it is
does.
a strategic advantage if you know how to
Exactly.
use it.
Exactly. The power of manifestation, the
Mm,
power of, what you put out there returning to you. That's not, to me, I don't think that's woo woo. It's tapping into another part of yourself, but it's necessary. It's that yin and yang. We're not meant to just be one part of ourselves. We are
mm,
multifaceted. And you need that analytical with the emotion. At least for me, I need the analytical with the emotional in order to make my best decisions. So if it's a full moon or a new moon, I know when I'm releasing and when I'm calling in. And I use that, as part of my
mhm,
strategic guide and my focus. So going
mm.
back to that example of identity work, if it's, full moon or a new moon, I might be releasing some beliefs that no longer serve me, writing them down on a piece of paper with, my Palo Santo and my sage and whatnot, and, lighting it on fire safely. Or, if the moon is in a water sign, then maybe we're tearing it up and putting it in, a bowl of water with some mantras and,
Yeah.
putting it down the drain. But for me, even if it's the placebo effect, I am grateful for having those practices because it gives me discipline. It gives me a very intentional time frame twice a month to set intentions. And then the analytical side and kind of the Leo side of me is like, great, now that that's set, let's get to work. And
Let's
I
get to
find that
work.
it just pairs really well together.
Yes, yes. There's a lot to dig into there. And I don't hear very many people talk about bringing those two together for a strategic advantage to live your whole and best life. And we should be talking about that more.
We should.
So, you have said that your success is a combination of skill and mindset. And you also said just being plain lucky. So, tell me what you mean by that.
I mean that there are so many women in my family that if they were given the same opportunity, they would have taken it even further. I know that because they are brilliant, brilliant women. And I'm so grateful that I hit the lottery to have had my parents who immigrated to the States not knowing each other, but they knew that they wanted to come to America. They got college scholarships from missionaries. They didn't even know each other. They just had that kind of entrepreneurial blind faith and hope. And also being very religious, a deep faith that creator would look out for them. And because of that, and being born in the DC metro area, where even the public schools in maybe not the best parts of town have strong curriculum and really advance the importance of education and studying and focus and all of the skills that I use today, a very diverse community. And a lot of those things were byproducts of before I even showed up in this world. You don't get to choose your parents. You don't get to choose your parents' stories, right? Like you're just born. And so I personally feel very lucky to have had the parents that I have. I feel very lucky that they instilled this value set in me. I feel lucky that, I have my mom's smile and my dad's laugh. Like all of these things I feel very lucky to have had because I see cousins in, Kinshasa or other neighborhoods and countries and whatnot. And it's a different situation had my parents not made the choices that they did. And I see that consistently. Like it's through blood that I'm able to see how lucky I am. And
Mm,
that's something that I don't take for granted. I also think through, if you're applying to an accelerator program, everyone is at the top of their game submitting their applications. Was mine great?
mhm,
Yes. Did I use
mhm,
mentors to help rip it apart to make sure that my packages were 10 out of 10? Of course. But the serendipitous nature of needing to be at the right event at the right time to even meet those mentors who would then humble me and train me and get me ready for those applications and those programs, very lucky. I can't control that. It's a matter of fate and serendipitous nature that's bigger than myself. And that's why I feel very lucky.
I really like how reflective you are and how you use that reflection to challenge yourself and your thinking. It's a beautiful thing to do. I don't know how often we consider how much of where we start in life is not up to us. I want to dig into a little bit more of this transition from entrepreneur to being in corporate and understand from you what really stands out as the biggest difference between the two. And then do you functionally enjoy one over the other?
Naya, that's a really good question. Okay, so I think the choice to go back to corporate was one that felt right. It feels right now. Entrepreneurship is such a big endeavor and a big responsibility that unless you are signing up for that and you have the right team around you and you feel like your idea is one that will actually change lives or go the distance, I personally do not feel called for that right now. So the idea of just coming up with a business for the sake of it is a waste of capital, and it would have burned out anyway. For me, I want to continue to learn as an avid learner. And I find the best way to do that is through just true lived experience. And as I think about where I want to continue in my career across product marketing and a lot of those psychological behavioral spaces, I saw opportunities to learn and continue to expand as I did pre-mentor method, but with the wisdom and the experiential scar tissue of a woman with 15 years of professional corporate experience at this point, that just completely changes the game. So for me, yeah, there are differences, but I find the differences to be fairly positive overall. Do you have as much control over the direction of things? Perhaps not. But do you need it in order to do impactful work? Also not in the corporate space. I appreciate the overhead. I appreciate how lovely the benefits packages are, and not having to go through some of those entrepreneurial hurdles that you just have to, especially when you're bootstrapping and building your business. So I enjoy those aspects of it. That said, I miss the smell of the arena so much. When I'm speaking at conferences where there are women with businesses, 1 to 3 years, I always leave with tears in my eyes because that energy, that early business energy, is so pure and so potent and so powerful. And you don't know how much you're radiating and glowing in that season until you're out of it. And you're like, oh, interesting. Where'd that go? Which is why I've been doing so much of this inner work again, because I kind of lost that sparkle for a while. I genuinely love the amplification of entrepreneurs. I love the problem solving. I love the ebbs and flows. It kind of feels like you're in your own almost reality show on a day-to-day basis because there's no consistency besides your devotion to that startup and your commitment to building that company. I know that I will return there. There's no way that I don't. But until that co-founder or that concept or business finds its way to me, being idle and just kind of dilly-dallying with nothing to do would not suit me well. Nobody wants a bored Janice Omadeke. I'll just say that.
We often have conversations about women who go from corporate to entrepreneur, but I don't think that we have a lot of conversations about women who go from entrepreneur back to corporate.
Yeah, it's called resting investing. Actually, there's a whole term for it.
Resting investing.
Resting investing. I'm in a few community groups, let's say, or just networks of serial entrepreneurs. You have to have had at least one exit. And when you're doing introductions and meeting people, you do meet people who are like, yeah, I had 3 businesses over the last 15 years. And right now I'm resting investing in this particular industry, but we'll get back at it if you know any opportunities, etc. You will see an entrepreneur takes their skills into either a different industry or continues in the same swim lane, but inside a larger organization for a while. I think it's actually healthy to take that break because when you're in the entrepreneurial space, I will never be an Olympian. Nobody needs me to run that fast. But the training, the mental endurance, the I will accomplish this goal come hell or high water, laser focus, similar to that of an Olympian. But they also need down seasons for their bodies and their minds mostly to recover and then get back into, pursuing their goals. So this resting period is a very important piece. Anybody who's just building and building and building, I question them because I'm like, what are you running from? Have you even had time to reflect? Are you just building the same business over and over again, essentially, with the principles you learned, what, like 20 years ago? 20 years in entrepreneurship land, that is a relic. Are you a lot of red flags when somebody isn't able to just take a moment and sit back and also allow others who are really in that energetic space to kind of run through, be an advocate for them simultaneously? I think it's the right thing to do.
There's another woman that I spoke to recently. Her name is Jessica Couch, and she is at the intersection of fashion and tech and has been an entrepreneur her entire life, but recently moved into corporate. And her perspective was interesting and very similar to you, actually, in what you're sharing. She said that after working for herself for so long and maintaining herself in New York City, which is one of the most expensive cities in the world, that going into corporate, she's like, this is one of the easiest things I have ever done. And there's something about when you don't have to eat what you kill, the benefits and the predictability. Entrepreneurship gets glorified in many respects over corporate, but being able to see the balance and benefit of the two and when to use one as a respite is perspective that was new to me.
I love that. The eat what you kill. It's so true. And I think corporations they benefit from having a seasoned entrepreneur on their team. There are a lot of benefits because as an entrepreneur, what ego? At a certain point, you wear every single hat. So that kind of, how do I phrase this? You understand that there's more in the world. You understand your place in the world. Your ego isn't as impacted if you're employee number 1077. Doesn't matter as much as the opportunity to engage with other brilliant people and to have some of that overhead and mental burden of hunting and eating what you kill off your shoulders to just take flight on the innovation and the things that that led you to building your businesses in the first place.
You did make history with the mentor method. What about yourself, though, do you wish people would lead with instead? Do you think that any part of your identity or your skills have been overshadowed
Wow, great
through
question.
that accomplishment?
I was thinking about this earlier today. I'm happy you asked. I do. I think so. I love mentorship, but I also think mentorship was my vehicle into solving a critical problem around the discrepancies and the disproportionate lack of access to resources for for minority professionals in corporate settings. That's what I was mad about. And I solved
Mm,
it by using my tech background. And I think sometimes that gets a little lost of, no, I built the algorithm. I built our MVP. I was a solo founder for a very long time. That's not to say that I don't need the Medal of Honor. I don't need a badge of honor. That was the hardest thing I've ever done. And if I had a co-founder, it would have been a lot easier. I'm not going to do that again. I would always have a co-founder at this point. But
mm,
I think some of those details of just the genuine entrepreneurial skill set that's
yeah.
required and the processes and the strategies that were executed across that and just across my general stats in my career, those are,
Mm,
I mean, they're impressive. Like, they are impressive, whether it's a 33% increase in homepage conversions in a
mm,
60-day time frame for an employer, or if it's being Austin's first Black woman to have a venture-backed tech exit. The skill set's the same. The delivery and the vehicle
hmm.
is what's different. And so sometimes it would be nice to talk more on like the processes and share those actual tactical tools versus some of the soft around like why mentorship matters. We know it. I'm happy to talk about it. It's an honor to discuss it as an expert in that space. But I think
Yeah.
there are also levels of expertise outside of that that I'm very excited to engage with your audience and others on.
About mindset and about reframing and about
Exactly.
grit and about knowing your stuff. I mean, I come back to you being able to rattle off those statistics off the top of your head very easily at the beginning. It's like being prepared in that way. All of that is fuel for the outcome as opposed to
Exactly.
mentorship and why to start a mentorship program specifically, from what I
Yes.
hear you saying.
I'm happy to mentor, especially around the tactical
Mm,
processes and the strategies that are required to really go the distance. And do I know everything? No, of course not. But I think there are areas that I feel very confident in discussing, like you were just saying, that I'm grateful that I've had mentors who have allowed me to practice and refine my frameworks. And I have found success with applying them. My mentees have found that. And I love it. I love discussing it.
Let's talk about what's next for you, because I think it will surprise most people in terms of what you have imagined for this next chapter in your life.
I am just genuinely fascinated by the way in which companies are leveraging human behavior to build out their revenue streams. I don't think that people talk about the AI war and how it's a race for who has the best, fastest, strongest kind of backing behind them from an AI sense. And yeah, of course, that's important. But if you look at category leaders across consumer packaged goods, if you look at media, if you look at the tech space, you'll notice that even from back in like 2009, when Uber and Tinder and Bumble and all of these phenomenal WeWork were coming out, it wasn't about kind of their tech stack. It was never about their tech stack. It was about how can you change human behavior for the rest of your life. And that's what they've done. If you look at Uber, how often were you just hopping into a stranger's car to get to the airport? Or Airbnb, the idea of sleeping in someone else's home. I mean, still not for me, but also like that would have been unheard of. Or swiping left and right to indicate your interest or lack of interest in someone. Even Keurig with the K-cup, terrible for the environment, but it's changed the way that people consume beverages. And like that entire new stream of products from other CPG companies that have now had to adapt to that technology. I am obsessed with those companies. I think the ones that are doing it now, like Netflix, is amazing. I think they're a big leader in the space around media consumption. TikTok is another big one, top of the leaderboard. But I'm eager to jump in with a company that is set or sees itself being able to change the trajectory of human behavior again. I think we're kind of ready for that. We're seeing it already, but going back to that curiosity, I'm poking around. I want to see who's doing it. I want to see where I can jump in and help and continue pouring gasoline on that. So that's my new focus.
Changing the trajectory of human behavior again. I was going to tap on you and this thread of curiosity that continues to show up. There's a lot of ambition, obviously, but there's also just genuine, deep curiosity with problems and solving them and bringing new innovative ideas and dissecting how things work and what makes people tick, companies tick.
Thank you.
For ambitious women who they're at a point of their own transition, I feel like Black women are just in a place of reflection, reevaluating, and transition right now, generally. For ambitious women who are listening, what would you say to them to help them trust the process of becoming? To trust this process that is very uncomfortable when you can't quite see the full light at the end of the tunnel. You have these ambitions. What advice would you have for them?
One of my mentors and I had happy hour recently, and I was telling him about the season I'm in. And he always gave me that parable. Have you heard the parable about the person that's on the roof during a hurricane? And they're like, God, okay. So I'm going to butcher it, but there's somebody this man is at the top of the roof of his house because there's a flood and a hurricane and he needs to be rescued. And he's like, God, get me out of here. God, save me. So as he's waiting for God to help him, a boat comes by and says, hey, do you need help? And he's like, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. Somebody else comes by and is like, do you need help? No, God's going to save me. Helicopter comes by. Hey, we're heading this way. Do you need help? No, God's going to help me. Person ends up dying and they go to heaven, this whole thing. And they're like, God, how am I here? I asked you multiple times to help me. And God goes, listen, I gave you 2 boats and a helicopter. What did you think was happening when those came to you? And that's been something that I've sat with for years when he told me that parable. And I referenced it with him again in this season that I'm in of transition. And he followed up and he said to me, well, Janice, don't forget that even if you listen to the first boat second boat or the helicopter, it doesn't mean that at any point you can't get off and jump to a new boat. It doesn't mean that you're just stuck in whatever direction or whatever you feel has saved you. You get to decide that. Just get off that first one. Get out of the problem you're in and solve that. But it doesn't mean that that's your future for the rest of your life. And I would encourage your audience to think about it the same way. It's okay to be flexible. It is okay to not know. It's okay if your plans change. To be a human being is to consistently evolve. From a cellular level, we are constantly evolving on a daily basis and renewing every night when you go to bed. So the direction of your life, what is calling you, don't be so rigid around it. Allow yourself to explore. Allow your inner children space to actually help you in that process. Walk the version of you that was 5 and loved painting through your corporate strategies and see if that really lights them up. You know, if you're in finance and maybe you were always a creative person, start exploring those pathways. Like there's just, life is too short to pigeonhole yourself. As Black women, we are dynamic. There is just a magnitude of layers and depth to our lives and our enriched experience where we owe it to ourselves to explore each aspect of who we are. I think generationally, depending on where, when, how you were raised, I know for me personally, it was get the job, keep the job, work at the job for 20 years.
Retire from the job.
Exact. Retire from the job and now you're a grandmother. Congratulations. You know, mission complete. And that didn't sit right with me, but it took a lot of trial and error and curiosity. You know, if somebody told me 7 years ago that I would live in Austin, Texas, and I would have done the things that I've done, including building a few businesses and writing a book, I would have said, no way. Because at that time, I was so dead set on becoming a creative director inside the management consulting space that anything that deviated outside of that, I wouldn't have been open to. So that and if I had stayed that rigid in my viewpoint, we literally would not be here, Naya. We would not be here. Exactly.
We wouldn't be here.
So use my example as kind of a warning and a heads up and an example of it working out okay. But you have to take that first step and you have to stay curious throughout your transition and be kind to yourself. Put in time for breaks, put in time for reflection, get a separate journal, just kind of writing down what you're feeling and how you're experiencing the transition. If you need a break from like the transitional work, that's okay. Go dancing with your besties, get that spicy margin queso, go for a walk, whatever energizes you that'll make you feel fulfilled in that moment. You don't always need to be working on yourself, but you do need to trust that you will return to yourself and do what's best for both you now and your inner children and those that paved the way for you in the future. And then it'll be fine. I promise it'll be fine.
So well said. From the Janice who sat down with me a year ago to the Janice today, what's the biggest evolution that you see in yourself?
I'm mad about the election results and I'm using
still
that
mad.
anger. I'm very angry. I'm very angry on a daily basis. I think that's also part of why I'm so passionate about the reframing effect, the distribution of information, how users and people consume on a daily basis and where they're getting their sources of whether it's TV or, you know, TikTok or, you know, Apple News, whatever it is. I'm obsessed with that now because we've seen and we're living in a time where one, they're battling, like overall the powers that be are battling what we're allowed to say, what we're allowed to see in a way that favors one lens that goes against our collective best interests. And also just the consistent pounding of bigotry, hatred, misinformation that is somehow packaged into politics when that's not supposed to be a part of politics. Now that we basically had a year of it now, because at this point, I think we were going through the DNC and a couple other big initiatives to get Kamala out there. Now that we're living in the reality that I was hoping we wouldn't get into, there's no choice but to evolve. I think I'm wiser. I think I'm stronger. I think some of the optimism and belief that I had in the world might be a little bit less steady, but I also have never felt more empowered and more focused on ensuring that while they're trying to limit our voices, while we have this tight window because we're at the buzzer, that as much information, mentorship, details that I can give other people so that they can start building the way I did in his first administration, like that is mission number one, followed by joining a company that's really dominating that behavioral science space because I want to play a role in that. And I don't think that, well, who knows? I can't say that I wouldn't have arrived at this place otherwise, but I do think that the political landscape and the lived experience of millions of people definitely driven me to feel called to serve in a very specific and Janice.
I truly appreciate your honest answer to that. During our first conversation, I distinctly remember asking you a question about what's next and you talking about the future with lots of optimism from a political perspective.
Yeah.
With Kamala being on the ballot and then where we are now. And I agree and it resonates a lot that my confidence and hope, confidence in the collective, not personal confidence, but confidence in the collective has taken a hit. My answer to all of that hate and that bigotry has been to invest it in myself, to invest it in the projects that I care about, the communities that I care about. And I think that that is a really, really productive response to a lot of things that feel out of our control.
Percent. I mean, even again, going back to Danielle, that was something that we worked pretty hard on as well. Just bracing for the unknown last fall, and then the new reality that feels unreal on a daily basis. Just making sure that we're weathering those storms as much as possible, but also building that tribe and community to help each other. I mean, just at this point, I think from what I've seen in the research that I've been doing from reputable spaces, there's a lot of distrust
A
in our
lot.
leadership, in media consumption, in just in general interactions with each other and the world through the new standard in which politicians are able to speak to one another.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in these times, the tribe is really what's going to sustain you.
Janice, if you, as we wrap up today, want to ask you a couple more questions. And that is, if you could give the Black Girl Ambition audience a tactical piece of advice for their next chapter, what would it be?
Mantras are very helpful. Use them until they feel true and you start reminding yourself of them. That's always a really good feeling. It may feel silly at first. It may feel like you're not really doing work, let's say, but that soft approach to empowering and believing yourself does seep in. Something I did over the summer after I did that list of why things wouldn't work out and let my naysayer run wild, and then I reframed it. I took the reframing, put it into Chat GPT, and said, okay, I want to use this, but I want it to resonate with a higher vibrational version of myself who is composed, who feels organized, who is focused, and has a clear direction and feels empowered in the gift in which she's bringing the world. And, ChatGPT and I did our thing for a few rounds. And I said, okay, turn this set into mantras that will play at about a minute, minute and a half. Took that, then found a free talk to text tool, found like an accent that I found just easier to listen to, very calming, very easy. Put the mantra that I built out in there, and now you have a minute and a half or 2 minute audio clip that's specifically for you. Play that every morning, play that every night before bed. Actually recite those mantras out loud. Pause it if you need to. Speak every line into existence. Don't be doing the dishes. Don't check email. Like really sit in that moment and call those things to yourself by verbally voicing them, and then trust that in the right moment, those opportunities will present themselves. But it starts with just building that self-belief. And at first I didn't love it. If I'm honest, I was like, I don't know about this. Like, whose voice even is this? But I have seen the results over, I would say like the last 6 months, especially, where now when I wake up, I'm reciting the whole thing on my own and I don't need that. I would also say the world is going to tell you no multiple times, especially right now where we're seeing the pendulum swing, especially in the corporate space, where there was the advancement of others. And now with DEI being taken away and everything else, the pendulum has swung back pretty aggressively and very quickly. Do not let that break you. That's the whole point. So show them and win by keeping your head up, moving forward, finding resources, leveraging the Black Girl Ambition community, and just continue to build, because there are people out there who do support you. There are people out there who still believe in you. Don't let the noise and the fact that our opponents have a louder microphone right now distract you from the fact that we're still out there, we're still fighting, we're still with you. So we're looking for you as much as you're looking for mentorship and support from us. And we're going to find each other soon if we haven't already. I guarantee you that.
Give me one or two of your favorite mantras.
Well, let's see. I want to pick one now. Oh, you know what? Actually, there's one that I have on the wallpaper of my phone already. I don't know if you can see that. So the one that I've been using recently is I am already whole and love is the beautiful bonus that enhances my life. Another one that I had before then, because I change these pretty frequently, is she wakes up in luxury, travels in style, and collects memories that sparkle like diamonds.
I'm going to put that in the show notes.
It's a good one.
That's great.
It's a good one. So, for me, putting that as the wallpaper of my phone helps me, because every time I look at it, again, creature of habit, there it is. So whether or not I'm subliminally really tapping into it or it's just a constant reminder on its own, it's there and it's very helpful.
Janice, where can my listeners find you on socials?
Yeah, let's hang out.
Get in contact with you.
So Instagram, Janice Omadeke, LinkedIn, Janice Omadeke PMP. Would love to hear from you. Let's talk, let's collab, let's continue co-conspiring, because we have a lot of work to do.
We have so much co-conspiring to do. Janice, the final question I have for you today, which I ask all of my guests on this platform, is, Janice, what is your greatest ambition?
Wow. I don't know. I'm getting moved by that question. Yeah. My biggest ambition, you said?
Your greatest ambition.
Greatest ambition?
In life.
Build a world where my young cousins, who are literally like 6 weeks old, little Aaliyah is the cutest little girl in the world. And I want to play my part in making the world safer for her as a young Black girl. I can't imagine what it would be like growing up. But if I can play a part in making the world more equitable, if I can play a part in being an example of what she can do times 10, because I know that she's right. Already brilliant. I'm one of those aunts. Right. Like, she's already brilliant to me.
Already got it.
So already president. But my greatest ambition is to continue to advance as many women and as many entrepreneurs as humanly possible through the gifts and the rooms that I've been so lucky to be a part of. That's really the big ambition. And whether that's through media opportunities and podcast interviews or, a show, or whether that's through my work inside corporations and being a part of that change of human behavior, I'm open to it. Again, stay curious, but that is my biggest ambition and my wish for the world.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey with me and for being here today, Janice. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Overzealous when I'm thinking about the cash flow. I never had no handouts, just came natural. I've been testing so much, all these wrestlers nice.